One of the brightest minds in the human history once said, the greater the mass, the greater the force of attraction. And there's also this other quote, like, with great assets comes with great responsibility. These are some of the quotes that has been on the back of my head, but I have never understand the true meaning behind it. Until I see Jane Doe. I have soon realized I understand everything, and I've reached enlightenment. So please allow me to share you my finding, and that is how to play Jane Doe like a pro with no BS, so that your Jane Doe wouldn't only just cook, but also ratatouille the shit out of your enemy, and maybe ratatouille on top of you. At this point, most of you would have known that main source of her DPS is coming from the critting the assault, but most importantly, managing her passion. Passion. I just butchered that pronunciation because passion would give her an incredibly amount of buff. So the main concept of Jane Doe is trying to make her stay in the passion mode as long as possible. And with her passion mechanics, that makes Jane Doe the strongest solo on-field DPS in the game. Unlike traditional DPS, Zhuyuan Soldier 11 and Alan Zhou, their DPS are largely rely on enemy getting stunned, while Jane Doe rely her buffing herself on field. So when it comes to team building, you wanna have Jane Doe has as much on-field time as possible. Any members that take away too much on-field time from Jane Doe is bound to be not synergistic with Jane Doe. She needs on-field time more than anyone in the game, except Qingyi as the only exception. So basically, when Jane Doe enters the passion state, which you can see when the bar turns red, along with this red dot that will allow you to spin to win. I will talk about the special attacks later. And when the bar is blue, it means that you are not in the passion state. And pretty much any action taken by Jane Doe will recharge the passion state. But there are only 4 ways to charge it back effectively. The first one is simply just out. It's gonna charge right back. You can also use ultimate without being in the passion state, without losing any passion buff. The second method is when you are performing chain attack with Jane Doe, it will also charge right back. And dodging is the most reliable way to refill your passion rate when your ult and chain attack is not available. And the last one is simply by performing the special attacks. But I wouldn't recommend to use it when you are not in the passion state, because you could also perform special attack when you are in passion state with the cost of passion, but with significant amount of damage. So I would recommend that you should use special attacks when you are in passion state, and don't use it when you are not in passion state, unless you have a plan for your rotation. And while you are in passion state, if you dodge your enemy, your passion will be recharged. The other mechanics that would consume one of your red dot is this spin to win. It would charge up your passion meters regardless if you are in the passion state or not. But it is best to use it while you are in passion state to get the most DPS out of it. I took this graph from a JP content creator, the Soulman channel, just like Mr. Pokey summarized the other CN analysis. So about the disc, the best gear would be 4-set Fanged Metal with 2 pieces Freedom Blue, Puffer Electro, or Hormone Punk. The best 2-set is definitely Freedom Blue, but the difference is negligible, so go with the one with better substat. And the second best pieces would be 4 pieces Freedom Blue with 2-set Hormone Punk, Fanged Metal, and Puffer Electro, and again go with the one with better substat. And the third best combination would be 2-set Freedom Blue, 2-set Fanged Metal, and 2-set Puffer Electro. For anyone who watched the Mr. Pokey video or the CN analysis, they would say that the differences between Freedom Blue and the Fanged Metal is not huge, but according to the JP testing, it's actually about 10 to 15% differences. Because the problem with that particular calculation is that they assume that Fanged Metal wouldn't get 100% uptime. But what if I tell you that I have the technique to keep the uptime for almost 100% after the first assault? And I call this technique holding, because you literally hold on to the anomaly without triggering it. It's a take that people use it all the time in the disorder setup, but people doesn't really have a name for it, like the snapshotting in Genshin. It's simply harder to explain, so I came out with the name holding. I was thinking about naming it as edging for the meme, but people would think of it as anomaly edging and nickname it as edging, so I'm gonna stick with the name holding. So we're gonna have some basic understanding with the Fanged medal, which is giving you 35% damage increase for 12 seconds the moment you inflict assault. So basically, if I fringe the enemy, I would get 35 damage buff from 4-piece Fanged medal and build the anomaly on top of that. And you can see my assault damage is at 264,000 with the passion stake. Without the Fanged medal buff, my assault damage is at 211,000 as comparison. But what if I trigger the anomaly and build it without triggering it? And I will trigger it after the buff ran out. So my buff has already ran out. So let's trigger again and see the numbers. I still got exactly the same amount of damage. And not only that, I also get the 35% damage buff instantly from the first hit. So why is this advanced technique matter? Because it would give you almost 100% uptime on taking the Fanged medal buff. Let me show you guys in the real fight. So you can see me playing normally, triggering the assault here and getting the Fanged medal buff. But right here, at the moment I almost build up the anomaly fully, I switch to Qingyi and let Qingyi do her thing, without worrying about Jane Doe is going to get the buff or not. Because once Qingyi and Seth did all the setup, the moment my Jane Doe comes up, she would trigger the assault immediately without losing any buff from Fanged medal, so that your Jane Doe can stay off field as long as your other team member needed to do the setup without worrying about losing the buff. So by the time I switch to Jane Doe, she has already triggered another assault and takes all the benefit from Fanged medal, losing almost no buff right here. And it's not even hard to do. All you need to do is not all the complicated setup, but just to aware of your passion. The most brain dead way to play it while still being effective is to keep attacking your enemy until your passion rate ran out, then swap to other characters to do their thing. And if you want to play sweaty, you want to keep an eye on both passion state and the anomaly meters, and just swap to other characters when your passion rate is not enough to build the anomaly for the next rotation, which is about 60 to 80%. There's absolutely zero debate on choice of disc. You want to use Fanged medal 4 pieces over 4 pieces Freedom Blue, because not only Fanged medal gives better stat, it's also easier to use than the Freedom Blue, and it's easier to achieve 100% uptime, while Freedom Blue you have to pay attention when you're gonna use the special attack, which Jane Doe isn't able to use that frequently. So one of the problem with Jane Doe when she's using Freedom Blue is that she already built anomaly fast enough. Let's say if I use special attack, it's gonna build about 50% in the indicator. But if I use special attack when it's at 99%, it's not gonna carry over. So you could overbuild the anomaly, and 4 pieces Freedom Blue would exacerbate that. So 4 pieces Freedom Blue is definitely viable, but definitely not optimal, and it's much harder to use. The only 2 scenarios that Freedom Blue may outperform is clearing the trash mob or daily grind or mission, where the mobs are relatively weak. And the second scenario is the boss has a weird HP threshold that allows Freedom Blue to finish off the boss faster than Fanged medal, which is rare, and it doesn't outperform that much either. So before we talk about the main stat, we're gonna talk about the substat first. The magic number is gonna be 375 anomaly proficiency for the 100% crit rate, and 420 anomaly proficiency for the maximum damage buff. So when we are able to get over 420 anomaly proficiency, you can go for stat like attack percentage and penetration rate. But just keep in mind that you can use that to increase 100 anomaly proficiency. And for the main stat, I would recommend anomaly proficiency on the disc number 4 or attack percentage if you're way above 420 anomaly. And disc number 5 would be physical damage, and piece number 6 would be anomaly mastery. And for the viable option, piece number 5, you can go for attack percentage if you have M1, this is what people said, and pen ratio if you have fusion compiler. And for piece number 6, attack percentage seems to be viable, and this is the ideal numbers, depends on the W engine you are using. You can pause the video if you are interested. So the best W engine is her signature. Who would have thought that? But you gotta keep in mind that you have to keep dodging when you are using this W engine, cause you're gonna lose a lot of buff for not doing that. And if you happen to have fusion compiler, be sure to go for pen ratio on your number 5 disc. It would make a respectable differences. There's a really cool tips if you're using fusion compiler. You can just skill dash cancel and do it 3 times to get the full buff. And the more practical way to use it is to skill dash cancel then attacks, but you can't really do this outside of the passion state. With rank AW engine, the electro lip gloss power level on refinement 1 is actually on par with whipping Gemini at refinement 5 and Rainforest refinement level 5. But the problem is this is a pay to win W engine. It's not free to play, and the power increase on level 5 refinement is bad, so it's not recommended to buy battle pass to max level it. And generally I would recommend Rainforest Gourmet over the Gemini for its consistency. But if you like the challenge and willing to learn the mechanics behind the Gemini or playing a disorder team, you could use Gemini because, to be honest, it doesn't make that much of a difference. And I personally use Gemini for the challenge. These are the power levels of W engine that I gathered. You can pause if you're interested. As for pool decision, you should always go for W engine first because statistically speaking, you could get it with less pool, while Mindscape 1 need more pools, but only provide roughly the same amount of power level as signature weapon. We can't talk about Jane Doe without mentioning about this cat boy, the best teammate for Jane Doe, Seth, because Seth would buff Jane Doe with 100 anomaly proficiency, which is massive. And to get that 100 anomaly buff, the easiest way would be special attacks, then hold the normal attack, then quick assist to Jane Doe, and voila, you get the buff. And the buff can last about 10 to 35 seconds because the shield will last 25 seconds. And when the shield disappeared or destroyed by enemy, you would see the timer up here. The buff will stay for another 10 seconds. And the easier way to get it is simply just parry the enemy, then counter it, then quick assist it. You will also get the buff without charging your Seth. And I personally like to buff Jane Doe this way because it's the quickest way to buff her. There's a lot more in-depth than this, but this is only what you need to know to buff Jane Doe. You can check out other Seth guide for more in-depths. You should go for 4 pieces Freedom Blue and 2 pieces Swing Jazz. But I would argue that you could also go with 2 pieces Freedom Blue, 2 pieces Shock Star, and 2 pieces Swing Jazz if you are going for the impact build. If you want to play Seth comfortably, you should go for Energy Regen on the 6 pieces. But generally you wanna go for Anomaly Mastery for the endgame damage. But you gotta remember that Anomaly has a lot to do with your levels, and I don't think you should prioritize Seth when you are building him with Jane Doe. And if your team doesn't have a stunner, you should definitely go for Impact. But again, Impact is also largely tied to your levels. I would say you don't need to worry about Anomaly and Impact if your set is not at level 50 or above. I would highly suggest you to try your luck on this banner to get his engine. 1 copy is powerful enough. And now let's go with team building. You definitely want to have Seth most of the time, so I'm gonna focus on the Seth Jane Doe core. So as I mentioned at the start of the videos, Jane is heavily rely herself to be on field for her to be strong. So the characters that synergize with Jane Doe well gotta be the characters that require the minimal on-field time to be synergistic with Jane Doe, except Qingyi as the only exception. So while playing the stun team, whether you're playing Koleda, Qingyi, or Anbi, you gotta know that every chain activity attack being triggered is going to max Jane Doe's passion rate, which is phenomenal. But still, for stun team to be effective, you have to minimize stunners on-field time by stunning the enemy as fast as possible. And the right time to switch out Jane Doe to the stun characters is when Jane Doe is running out of passion. Anby is actually decent on this team, she's not bad at all. There's a dude in Japan, player Shiyu 17, in 39 seconds with this team, and with free-to-play W engine Rainforest Gourmet, Mindscape Zero. This is freaking amazing. My personal best is 47 seconds. Without shadow of a doubt, this is one of the best team in this patch. This team is on par with the buffer team that I'm gonna talk about and far very close to best in slot team. Sorry, but I'm not talking about Rina. I'm talking about Mindscape 6 Lucy. So I saw this video on yesterday. He cleared Shiyu defense 17 in 35 seconds. Holy crap. And the main reason that Lucy is so good is because of her buff in Mindscape 6 that could extend her buff up to 30 seconds. Even though he said that he got lucky with the RNG for how enemy move. But still, it's amazing. I personally tried this team with Mindscape 2 Lucy, and I got a solid 69 seconds, so definitely don't sleep on Lucy. The reason that this buffer team is so strong is because Seth and Lucy took so little on-field time to be effective, and the other characters like Rina, Nicole, these buffer are absolutely the best in slot in the current meta. Now let's move to the more controversial build, and one of them is Piper. So for whatever reason, if you have to use Piper, you wanna switch Seth to Lucy for Piper to be effective, because the main role of Piper is 1. To activate the Freedom Blue, and 2. To activate her team buff, which is increased 18% of damage. And the third role is to build up the Anomaly to be the burst DPS for Jane Doe when she's running out of passion. This is actually a good team. And the next more controversial one is Nekomata. I don't know much about Nekomata, but if she contests too much on-field time from Jane Doe, then she's probably not good. And the most controversial one is Grace. Because of the Disorder team, you can see that Jane's team buff is actually require another Anomaly characters to be on the same team. And that leads to people think that Grace is a good candidate for Jane, but she's not. The only reason that this team is decent is because Grace is strong by herself. And even pairing with Rina, it feels like you are playing two different team comp in one team, but in a bad way. Because Grace simply took too much on-field time for Jane Doe to be effective. As I mentioned earlier, the more characters took away Jane Doe's on-field time, the lesser they are going to be synergistic. So we just gotta have to wait for the future Anomaly characters for her Disorder team to work. And I have came across this content creator testing all the team, Apple. His tests are solid because I think there's no better theory crafting than actually testing it out. Go check his videos if you want more in-depth about the team building. I agree with pretty much all of this test result, so I hope this guide helped. Don't forget to drop sub and like and comment. My name is Realsuke and see you next time.